Mindset control over attitude. This week's calculation act that we want to acknowledge the right and the responsibility act, the right to calculate the mental wellness communication that are the computerized communication that all New Zealand, all international countries are building on. All international countries are then acknowledged and have then a right to calculate in all accuracy. And today we only want to focus on the thoroughness in calculation, right? And when we calculate today under the Hospitalised Act that calculates the birth that babies are born on a daily basis, and in a hospital calculation communication, then we calculate the households that the communication hold business and right. And when we today want to listen to the households that businesses hold communication on, acknowledging the computerized communication that acknowledges all houses in the country, not limited to houses that then therefore have a computer in their houses, a television in their houses, a mobile cell phone device in their houses, a telephone line communication in their houses, but acknowledging the houses that the computerized communication calculates on. And while the calculation calculates on houses in a specific journey communication that families have arrived in a country on, that families have been homed in a country on, in acknowledgement to your citizenship, your residency acknowledgement, in acknowledgement to the duration of time that you were in the country, in acknowledgement to the not limited act that are the legislative court of law, right? Not limited to the citizenship, right? But limited to the nationality New Zealand, the country, the nationality South Africa, the country, right? And when the calculation, it calculates in all accuracy, and it can calculate and divert years. The Bible calculates 2,000 years in calculation of when families were calculated under the computerized act. Then the calculation then acknowledges the circumstances that the country are then therefore meant to have had in these years, not limited to aggressions, not limited to oppressions, but acknowledging all that the computerized communication then therefore built on, that all that the country were then acknowledging under the Building Communication, that are the Building Rights Act, right? And when we today talk under the Building Rights Act, the Calculation Act, the Hospitalised Act, and the communication today can take us and divert us into all different discussions that we can discuss the mental wellness state of any country and how it affects different countries, how it affects the people that are different nationalities that traveled into a national country, that the people are sometimes not solely dependent on the computerized communication in the country that they have traveled to, but therefore dependent on the country that they traveled from, right? When we look at wars today, in the letter in war say, dear reader, this is where the communication are then therefore directed from, or the communication therefore derives from, and therefore the from communication in acknowledgement to the to communication, right? And when we calculate today the circumstances on earth, and we acknowledge under the communication line that to us are the telephone line that households today does not have, unless they really want to hold onto the telephone line communication. Most people hold onto the cell phone media part of it, but in acknowledgement to the communications computerized right, the communication of a telephone line then have a right to have a telephone line in that are not only a mobile phone device in your house, right? Under the Calculations Act, under the Mental Wellness Act, the communications that have been accessed, the communications that have been built in the country, what households are meant to have a telephone line, not limited to a telephone line that are signaled to an electricity plug, but also the telephone line that then therefore under the 1+1 communication acknowledged in a cell phone, mobile phone line, right? when countries today have to have the accuracy in under the Calculations Act, right, and how the country builds under computerized communication, how the Hospitalised Act, that when people are now not only hospitalized, but when the birth womb have been born in its years in all calculation under the Hospitalised Act's computerized communication, then the mental state that the countries then would have had in these years, right, in all that the countries might have found challenge to it years ago when they were building under computerized communication. And remember, years ago when countries began to build under computerized communication, countries had a decision on whether the communication are located in the country, whether they want to build under communication, whether the silver building that we look at today that stands in New York City in the middle of a green tree, and the green tree has a right to be there, and the silver building communication or the telephone line communication acknowledged in all cell phone media, in all that the computerized act calculates on. And countries today want to shift the argument and aggress one another under the computerized act that allows for the communication line in all acknowledgement and responsibility. Then countries today have a right to listen to how do countries calculate under the Hospitalised Act, right? How do countries calculate the computerized households processes that then for derives in calculation under the Hospitalised Act, that then for are the Mental Wellness Act, right? That therefore are how fair should processes be in our 100 years, how fair were processes years ago, how fair are processes meant to be in these 100 years, what processes can we hold on to that are a necessity in our years, what processes are we then therefore having to implement that are the +1 communication that were implemented, the Bible would say 2,000 years ago under the same communication line that then therefore have a right to be acknowledged under the communication line in our years, right? And while we are now in the year 2026, it's the HR 2025-2026 discussion under the Mental Wellness Act that allows for the Hospitalised Act to be acknowledged in all the accuracy, in all that the computerized communication have to acknowledge in all households that sometimes therefore respond to the communication line in all acknowledgement, right? When households have a right to respond in all acknowledgement, and households learn so much about the Hospitalised Act, about how processes then therefore also includes the circumstances that then are therefore under the Hospitalised Act, and a data board explained, while the communication sometimes only includes a governmental office communication line, right? So let's say the telephone line only includes the parliamentary office communication line that the Mental Wellness Act acknowledged at, then the Hospitalised Act are the +1 communication line that acknowledges the same communication that are the right for processes to be fair in countries, right? Then the Hospitalised Act have a responsibility, hospitals have a responsibility, the Act have a responsibility to ensure fairness in its processes, and therefore the Governmental Process Act, where computerized communications that implements employment right, that implements fair processes, that implements fair communications that derives to and from hospitals, to and from houses, how people then therefore travel to and from hospitals, to and from houses to their workplaces on a daily basis. Then the communication therefore acknowledges in all fairness and in all responsibility. And when the communication today has become so sensitive, because the communication today have include so much more than the communication years ago were included in, right? Today the communication in the hospital includes the school color journey that the person have walked in its year. Years ago under the Hospitalised Act, the school color journey were then not only a compulsory communication computerized process that then therefore had to be built in the hospital, right? When the hospitals did not have had to acknowledge the complete school color communication, school color telephone line years ago, that hospitals in these years, in the year 2026 that we are in, have to acknowledge under the Hospitalised Act, right? And when the Act have to update itself so regularly in all that we've experienced under the computerized communication, in all that the computerized communication can control our countries, and in all that the computerized communication can expose countries to, then countries today have a right to decide how to implement the Calculations Act in a way that are fair and that are right, that includes where finances derives from, that includes how households are provided, that includes how households are therefore appreciating and acknowledging the fair 100-year journey in the Calculations Act, and the 100-year journey that calculates back of where families then therefore derive from, and where the computerized communication are then therefore acknowledged and right. And while the computerized communication I acknowledged on a journey that was introduced with my Queen Mom Universe and George Philander under 1969 Tilbach Saron Road, right? And while my mama was walking under the communication, while my mama walked Calvinia Ceres Road, and my mama arrived safely in Ceres, South Africa under communication line, and the communication line acknowledges the complete journey that the family have walked in its years, like John Wick writes in his film, the complete journey responsibility that the communication in John Wick 3, when he walks through the hotel, that the communication that is employed in American television walks with him in all decision making, not limited to his daily decisions, but his right of employment acknowledgement in American television, right? And when you have a right to be employed and acknowledged under the communication line, and the communication are telephone line, and the communication are how your family receives information in its journey, and how the communication have acknowledged you in, then you have a right to be treated fairly in it, right? And like John Wick explains in the John Wick 3 film, the Keanu Reeves John Wick 3 film, that when you have a right to be treated fairly under the employment right communication, and when the computerized communication can take so much control on you, and when you have a right to decide how you respond to the control that the communication have on you, right? How humanity can sometimes access the communication through you, the human being, and then the effect that it has on your human body are then sometimes all that I explained in the John Wick 3 film, right? All that John Wick then explained to us, not limited to John Wick films. We talk about Brad Pitt, them's films, Ocean's 11. We talk about all the computerized communications that the White House of America have then educated me, Queen Ribea Elise, on the journey. All the films that I've been introduced to in our Pontobox 323A house that were playing in our house's computerized communication. When my brother King Richard, they were busy in the music communication, how the communications them under the computerized act walked in a universe next to the music communication that sounds as loud as how the earth is sounding in our ears, right? And when the musicians are not taking the blame on earth in our ears for the music communication being so loud, while the computerized act also have responsibility that the music communication also are calculated through. And then the communication under the 1+1 office communication are then therefore in all acknowledgement, right? When humanity are acknowledged in all acknowledgement, the communications that we access then in the universe are acknowledged in all acknowledgement. Our responsibility to be responsible in it are then acknowledged in all acknowledgement, and our acknowledgement to be treated fairly while we walk our journeys under the computerized communication are then also acknowledged, right? Under the Human Rights Acknowledgement Act that me, Queen Ribea Elise, then studied in Human Resources. And while the Human Rights Acknowledgement Act calculates in all accuracy how we calculate in our journeys under the computerized act that are calculating the circumstances that we sometimes have to include in our day that are sometimes not necessary to be part of our day, right? Me, Queen Ribea, say I don't like loud shouting. The computerized calculation act causes the loud shouting because the computer on a daily basis are still responding, still getting introduced, in how its journey are in our years, in how its journey should be the years after these years, and how the 100-year journey are then still in all accuracy, then being calculated, not limited to calculation also, but to scientific journey that the families have walked in their years, right? And when the communication then acknowledges so thoroughly And the communication then walked us so clearly in where we have to be at in our processes, like in my human resources career and my LinkedIn page. I always say refer to LinkedIn page Ribea Elise, where the communication walks so clearly through all the offices that had acknowledged you at, that your telephone line are at, that your family womb's telephone line are at, that are not only a telephone line, but there are communication like a television program that plays in your whole human body without you realizing it. Then humanity was not yet robots, then also robots, not yet an alien key, then also an alien key, not yet the computer, but then also the computerized communication that today have so much effect on how the circumstances on earth are, that certain people have found a fair way for them in the communication line, while other people feel that they have been treated so unfairly. And then it can sometimes be legislatively right in the parliamentary office, right? Like how my brother King Zak them in South Africa on our purpose serving Facebook page that I took the video in 2020 said, but my sister, the government can sometimes do the house's communications right, so that it does not aggress us. So, and when the government have a responsibility in the communication have such an effect on our human brains, and it makes us so angry, then there's certain times that we kindly want the communication to be right in all that governmental leaders have a responsibility and that they can do all households processes in all acknowledgement, that they learn that the communication are still building, the communication are still getting training, the communication are still monitoring the communication of many years ago, the communication are calculating how the years after our years should be, the communication are the whole time having an effect on our human bodies, and then therefore governmental leaders can sometimes do our houses right on a daily basis. No matter who was now guilty on the earth for oppressing who, when we all have responsibility and we all can do our work right, like King Zak said on my purpose serving page in 2020 in the live stream video that I took COVID-19 in Belleville, while all the stores were full of angriness and aggression, and me, Queen Ribea Elise, looked at what are the people fighting about, and then it was the computerized communication that have such an effect on our human brain that sometimes parts of all the people employed in it can sometimes do it right in our households, in all that we learn to be responsible in, right? In all that we learn to treat one another fairly in, right? And then it would not have such an aggressive effect on our human reactions in these 100 years. I always say that a few years ago, my Queen Mom Universe and George Philander, them in Park community, had a quiet community, and they knew how to do the communication, and they did it in all accuracy, in all that Queen Miss George Philander walked the Calvinia Road to Park community at, in all that me, Queen Ribea Elise, upon in the communication at, in all acknowledgement and responsibility, and the families did very good those years ago, and the community were quiet, the community were respectful on it, the community were educated to respect one another, and for the communication to be so out of control in these years are sometimes a little bit unfair on other people that finds themselves in the quietness of the communication, right? And then I was just now busy preparing my Christmas morning, and New Zealand was shouting fuck off into my Christmas morning so many numerous times, sorry for the swear word, but I had to now find my way through it, right? And now it got me to my mindset control over attitude of all the reasons why, who they were now shouting fuck off to in the universe, and who they said in the universe to go away from the house's communication. And then it was my mindset control over attitude telephone line that was calling my way, right? And then there's right ways that government can say that the phone are ringing in your house, like the film says, the phone are ringing, pick it up, even if we can't hear it and it's a computerized communication. And then certain people can just, sometimes government can do the communication in a way that they say to you, rather than the computerized communication when you can hear them so clearly in your house, that there's kindly a communication for this household. The computerized communication can only say that kindly there's a communication waiting in line for this household. That's all that the robot communication can say, rather than New Zealand shouting the swear word so into one another's houses, and it causes cyclones in America, and it causes cyclones in New Zealand, and the world chases one another on it. The computerized communication can kindly only have a robot that says, kindly you have a computerized communication waiting in your house, even if your house are built on the Apple computerized communication where the Apple robot talks to you, and you can't see that your house looks like an Apple communication, and you are me, Queen Ribea Elise, and it's meant to be a palace, and you should realize that it's anyway Apple communication, and the Apple computer can now anyway calling your way, or the AI are now anyway calling your way, and then there's kindly a way for governmental leaders to do such a process right in households that are now not bold under the Apple communication, that computer robot that talks to you, the human being in the house, and that says that there's now currently a communication waiting for you. And now our houses are so, and it does not mean that governmental leaders should swear into our houses at that communication moment in time. The communications name are that there are now currently a communication waiting for your house. It's currently maybe at a grocery store. It's currently maybe to have to do with your Christmas grocery shopping, but there are now currently a communication waiting for your house, and that's the only thing that governmental leaders can sometimes do under the circumstances. That are all that we want to talk about under the calculations today, and how the computerized communication calculates us into all discussions. No matter if you have the AI in your house, you are calculated into the AI discussion. No matter if you can hear the AI robot talking to your house, the AI robot are talking most of the time into your house, also into your human body on a daily basis. And we learn it in all the Chinese, Japanese, North Korean, South Koreans, Vietnamese, Pokemon films that China educate us on, that the computerized communication are talking to us on a daily basis. Whether our houses are built under it, whether we realize it, and governmental leaders can kindly do a process right for us under the Calculations Act that calculate that all houses are calculated under the same computerized act. And therefore, our conclusion with today's legislative responsibility are that governmental leaders implement processes that are not yet only fair, but they are in acknowledgement to all that the computerized Hospitalised Act are then also having to be responsible in when they have access to our houses, or when they can access our human body under the computerized communication that are signaled in different parts of the universe, like we learn in American Star Television computerized communication, like John Witt educates us in the films, that while the hospital communication that you have given birth to can access you somewhere in the universe, and while its employees working there, then the government should implement processes that are fair and that are right, and that are acknowledgement to all that the communication introduces to us in our years. Apostrophe the introduction on our motivational book with me, Ribea Elise, or with me, Queen Ribea Elise. That are all that we want to talk about on this day, and the mindset control over our